I contented myself with showing that without moral feeling there would be nothing beautiful or sublime for us, that on this, the quasi-law-like claim for applause in everything which shall bear this name is founded, and that the subjective element of morality in our being, which under the name of moral feeling is inscrutable, is that in relation to which, therefore not in relation to objective concepts of reason, whose kind is required for the judgment according to moral laws, being able to judge is taste, which therefore is not at all based on the coincidental of sensation, but on an, albeit not discursive but intuitive, principle a priori. Immanuel Kant. I've talked extensively now about what beauty means to Kant, what the taste is, the taste of reflection, the taste for beauty, and how beauty is connected to morality. Before moving on, there's one more thing to discuss, and that is how, according to Kant, there is also a dialectic of the aesthetical power of judgment. Dialectic, I explained that in more detail in another lecture already. Dialectic to Kant means the teaching, the doctrine of illusion. And dialectic is meant to teach us not to create such illusions and to fool people with them, but rather it is intended by Kant always to lift the illusion, to show where the error in thinking lies. And with dialectic, in his critiques, he describes a phenomenon whereby our thinking, by its own nature, creates false arguments, false proofs, and gets in conflict with itself, where our thinking seems to prove things that, when we reflect about them critically, are shown to not be true or not be provable. And this dialectic of the aesthetical power of judgment is an antinomy. I already discussed that too, particularly in my lecture on cosmology, on the makeup of the world, on freedom. I said that usually dialectic for Kant means antinomy, so much so that they are almost synonymous. Only in the Critique of Pure Reason there are also other forms of dialectic, two other kinds of wrong arguments. But there are also antinomies in the Critique of Pure Reason, and in all of Kant's other works where there is a dialectic, including in the other two critiques, the dialectic is only a dialectic of antinomies. And what that means is an antinomy is when we have two opposing statements, a thesis and an antithesis, that both seem to be excluding one another. So only one could be true, and if it's true, the other must be false, or the other way around. But it seems that they are both true, or that they are both untrue. So both, it seems, can be proven, or both can be disproven. And this, again, is something that arises from the very nature of our thinking. It's not a false illusion created by someone to fool us, but our own thinking creates this thesis and this antithesis, which both seem equally valid. Well, what is the dialectical antinomy when it comes to taste, when it comes to beauty? It is basically about the question whether and how there can be a controversy when it comes to beauty and disagreeing about what is beautiful or not. Kant says that the thesis claims we cannot dispute about what is beautiful. So when two people disagree about finding something beautiful or not beautiful, they cannot dispute about that, because the judgment on something being beautiful is not based on a concept. Concepts were basically rules. I explained that in the lecture on the intellect, because the intellect is the faculty of concepts to Kant. Concepts are general representations. They are sorts of rules by which we understand things. And when it comes to beauty, it is, as I previously explained, not based on concepts, right? To find a flower beautiful, I don't need to have a concept of that flower. I don't need to know what it is, like what species of flower, nor do I need to know what it is for. I don't need to be aware that the blossom is there to produce new flowers, to be pollinated by insects. I don't need a concept to find something beautiful. And that is precisely the reason the thesis claims why we can't have a dispute on finding something beautiful. If it was based on a concept, and if therefore a dispute was possible, then it would no longer be an aesthetical pleasure that we are feeling when it comes to beauty. Because I explained in the lecture on pleasure and displeasure, I explained that to Kant there are three types of pleasure. And the aesthetical pleasure, the purely contemplative pleasure that we take in a beautiful, is the second kind, is the middle kind. If it was based on a concept, then it would be the third kind of pleasure. It would be the intellectual pleasure. It would be what Kant calls approval of the good. We would then enjoy looking at something because, according to our concept of that thing, it is perfect, and because we approved of its perfection. Maybe because it was useful for us, or maybe because it was morally good. But in both those cases, that would be intellectual pleasure. And it would mean that we could argue about what is beautiful. We could prove that something is beautiful to someone else who doesn't agree at first. And it would mean basically that dogmatic objective rationalism is right. I talked about that too in the lecture on what is pleasure, how the dogmatic rationalism claimed the beautiful is the perfect, and we find something beautiful because we find it perfect. That would mean that it is based on concepts, because only if I have a concept of something and of what it is supposed to be, only then can I decide whether it is perfect for that purpose or not. But that is not the case. As I explained in the lecture on taste, beauty is not based on a concept of that thing which I find beautiful. We can't give a rule for why something is beautiful. So much so, as I said in that other lecture, that Kant says, if I don't like a theater play, you can show me that it follows all the rules for how a play should be that have been given from Aristotle to Lessing. Even if you are right, I would rather conclude that the rules must be wrong, since apparently a play can follow those rules and still be a bad play, rather than agreeing that it must be a good play and suddenly feeling that it is beautiful when before I didn't. So that is the thesis. And it is opposed by the antithesis, which says we can quarrel about beauty. A statement that seems to be proven even by experience, because when we find something beautiful and someone else disagrees with us, we do quarrel. We do say, oh, you are clueless, you have no taste, how can you not like this, it's so beautiful. And this is different from the first kind of pleasure, the mere sense pleasure. Because here, what Kant calls the delight and the pleasant, here we mostly accept that there can be no quarrel about it. Precisely because it is not based on any concepts, it is just based on how my senses are affected by something, how I'm feeling. And if a certain dish tastes good to me, but it tastes bad to someone else, or if something is sexually arousing to me, but it is not to someone else, we accept that people are different and therefore like different things. Like sexually, one person might have this sexual orientation and the other person might have this orientation, or one person might have this fetish or this kink, and another person might not share that fetish or kink. We wouldn't say that the person who doesn't share our taste in food or our fetishes has no taste. We would just say he has a different taste. But when it comes to beauty, I'm not so ready to just accept that, oh, everyone has a different taste. Maybe more so nowadays because it's the reigning ideology, so many people just go by that ideology without reflecting. But generally, no. If I found something very beautiful and another person didn't, I would somehow think that there's something wrong with him. I would say, you have no taste, or maybe in an extreme case I would even say you have no soul if this doesn't touch you, if you don't find the beauty in this. But in order for this to be possible, for us to quarrel about it, it cannot be based merely on the senses. It must be based on a concept. And so we have the thesis claiming we cannot dispute about beauty, for it is not based on a concept. And the antithesis claiming we can quarrel about it because it is based on a concept. And it seems very obvious that one of those statements must be wrong. As a side note, I think it would make more sense to call the first one the antithesis and the second one the thesis, because clearly the first position, that beauty is not based on a concept and so we cannot dispute about it, is an empiricist position, while the second position, that it is based on a concept and we can quarrel about it, is a rationalistic one. And in other instances where there's an antinomy, like in the critique of pure reason, where there are 4 antinomies when it comes to the makeup of the world, there Kant calls the rationalistic positions the thesis always, and the antithesis is the empiricist position. So for the sake of the architectonic and the symmetry of the system, I think it would have made more sense if in the critique of the power of judgment, Kant too would have called the rationalist position the thesis and the empiricist position the antithesis. But for some reason I can't tell you, maybe he just didn't think about it, he did it the other way around. But ultimately it seems to not matter much. What does matter, of course, is what we do with this. What is the solution to this conflict? Well, like he does in the critique of pure reason with the 2 dynamical antinomies of freedom and necessity, here too Kant says both the thesis and the antithesis are correct, and there actually is no contradiction between them, as long as you understand both of them correctly. Because they seem to contradict, because the thesis says beauty is not based on a concept and the antithesis says it is based on a concept. but they only contradict because of a misunderstanding, because they both use the word concept in a different way, Kant says. Because there are two kinds of concepts. For one, I can have concepts with my intellect, which generally speaking is the faculty of concepts. The faculty by which I understand things, by which I understand what they are, because I make rules, and the concept is nothing but a rule. I make rules of what a thing is. So concepts like tree or stone or dog or bird are concepts of my intellect that have specific determined attributes. But on the other hand, there's also reason. And reason has its own sorts of concepts, which Kant calls the ideas. I talked about both, about the intellect and about reason, in other lectures already. And these ideas are concepts of reason that go completely beyond experience and that I can't find in experience. And namely, there's one idea which is of special importance to Kant, the idea of the thing in itself. His whole transcendental idealism is sort of based on that. And I recommend listening to my lectures on transcendental idealism and also on sensuality and the supersensual. So we have, even if most people don't reflect on it and are unconscious of it, we have this idea, this necessary idea of a thing in itself. Kant says we can divide the things into appearances and things in themselves, into phenomena and noumena, into sensibilia and intelligibilia. The first, the appearances, are, as their name suggests, the things as they appear to us, as we see and hear and feel them and so on, as we view them in time and space. They are the things as they affect our senses, as we are affected by them. The thing in itself, however, is not something that can be viewed. It is just a the sort of the thing, again, as the name suggests, the thing as it is in itself. That is, the thing as it is independently of me and independently of how it affects my senses. And it should be immediately clear that this is just a thought and not something that can ever be viewed, because as soon as I was viewing it, I would be affected by that thing in itself, and it would appear to me, and therefore it would no longer be the thing in itself. It would now be an appearance. And this thing in itself, Kant stresses, is just a concept of limitation. It is not a positive concept. I cannot make any statements about the thing in itself. I cannot know what it is, what its attributes are. It does not have any determined attributes. That is precisely what the critique of pure reason shows, that any metaphysics trying to know something specific about the thing in itself is fooling itself. No, it is a negative concept. I can only say what it is not. I cannot say what it is. I can only say it is not sensual. It is supersensual. It is not appearing to me. It is something that exists in itself. It is not what is viewed by me, but rather it is something I cannot view. I can only think. But more I cannot say about it. And it only has, in theoretical philosophy, when it comes to cognition, it only has this job, so to say, of being a concept of limitation, of reminding us that what we do experience. What we do view is just that, is just an object appearing to us, but not a thing in itself. Is an object that therefore in some way depends on me, because it is an appearance, or there cannot be an appearance without someone to whom it appears. It is therefore an object which must be under the conditions of the possibility of experience, like time and space as my forms of viewing. Because if it did not meet these conditions of the possibility of experience, then I could not experience it. That is all, however, I can say about this thing in itself. I cannot make any positive statements about it. And so this is why, according to Kant, when it comes to beauty, both the thesis and the antithesis are correct. The thesis says there cannot be a dispute about beauty. It is not based on concepts. What it means is it is not based on any concepts of the intellect. I don't have any concrete understanding of what beauty is. I cannot give any rules for what makes something beautiful. And therefore, there cannot be a dispute about it. That means we cannot argue about it. We cannot prove to someone who disagrees with us that something which he doesn't find beautiful is indeed beautiful, or that something which he does find beautiful is actually not beautiful. I cannot demonstrate beauty to anyone with arguments. But on the other hand, it is not just based on the senses and what is pleasant to my senses, but rather it is based on a concept, on reason's idea of the supersensual. And therefore, we can quarrel about it. We can quarrel about whether something fits with that concept, with that idea or not. So, while we cannot demonstrate that something is or isn't beautiful, while we cannot exchange actual arguments about it, we can strongly disagree about it. We can tell someone else who disagrees with us, you have no taste. And this quarrel is possible because beauty is based on a concept, but not on a concept we know anything about, not on a concept that is determined in its attributes in some way. In fact, what Kant is saying is, there is this thing in itself which we must think as this supersensual substrate or bedrock, so to say, behind or under the thing that appears to us. But there is not just a supersensual object, there is not just a thing in itself, but rather I also have to think of an I in itself. So I, the subject, also can be thought of in a twofold manner. And I discussed this too already in my lecture on the apperception. There is a homo phenomenon and a homo noumenon to Kant. So there is me as I appear to myself through my inner sense, through the representations I have, the thoughts, the feelings, and so on, that appear to me. Me as this specific empirical individual with this specific empirical character. But then, behind this I, whose representations, whose thoughts and feelings and desires appear to me, I also have to think of an I in itself, who is the subject having these representations, thinking these thoughts, and so on. And here too, Kant showed that I cannot know. Not just can I not know the thing in itself, I cannot even know myself in myself. I cannot know what I am beyond the way I appear to myself. So I cannot know. I discussed this in my lecture on the soul and whether I'm an immortal spirit or just my brain. I cannot know if that which appears to me as a thinking subject is in reality behind that appearance, so to say, a spirit which just is connected with the body but could also live without the body, or whether it is just my brain in the end which is thinking. Well, Kant says that our supersensual nature basically gives us the task to create a harmony between our faculties of cognition. So our power of imagination and our intellect should be brought into a harmony. They should not be at odds with each other. I should not let my imagination run wild and create wild fantasies that go beyond the intellect's rules. But also the intellect should not restrict the imagination too much and basically kill it off. And also they should not be without one another. As Kant says, viewing, so having an image without having a concept of what that is, what it is an image of, is blind. But on the other hand, if with my intellect I think of certain concepts, certain rules, but these concepts are not filled with any sort of viewing, then I don't know if what I'm thinking of actually exists or whether it's just an empty thought and a wild pipe dream that I just made up. So we should bring our two faculties of cognition, the power of imagination and the intellect, sensuality and intellectuality, we should bring them into harmony. And not just that, we should also bring them, or bring us as the subject, into harmony with the object which is cognized. And that is precisely what is happening in beauty. We could say that when we find something beautiful, it is as if in the supersensual realm, but about which we know nothing, except the negative knowledge that it is not the sensual realm. But in this supersensual realm, the object in itself, about which I know nothing, so whatever it may be, and the subject in itself, whatever that may be, because I know nothing about that either, they meet and they fit together in a way. There is a sort of harmony between them. And that harmony, so to say, here, down here in the sensual realm, subjectively is felt as a certain pleasure. And that is what we call beauty. This is precisely why, as explained in the lecture on beauty, beauty, the pleasure we take in beauty, is necessary in a way. Because, well, the sense pleasure, there's just a fitting together, a harmony between the empirical object, the appearing object, and the appearing subject, the empirical me. And a harmony maybe between that object and my body. And someone else who appears in another way, who has another body, maybe there's no harmony between him and that object. So to him it doesn't bring pleasure. But when it comes to beauty, there's a harmony between that thing in itself and me in myself. Me not as this empirical appearing human, but rather as a human being in general. There is a harmony, you could say, between the thing in itself and humanity itself. And that is why it is necessary for any human, for any being like me, who is not just a sensual being, because such a being, an animal, could only experience sense pleasure but not beauty, because to such a being there is nothing supersensual. There's only the world of appearance. But a purely intellectual being, which has no world of appearance at all, but just the intelligible world, such a being also wouldn't know of beauty. But for any being like me, which is sensual and intellectual, there is a necessity to find something beautiful. And that is precisely why we can quarrel about it. Why I can tell someone who doesn't find the same thing beautiful as me, you have no taste. There is something wrong with you, because I do experience a harmony between that thing in itself and me in myself here. And since you in yourself are the same as me in myself, like as appearances we might be different, we might appear as different individuals, but as humanity we are the same. Since that is the case, you too should find this beautiful. So we can quarrel here, because there is a concept of that harmony between me and the object. But it is a concept of a supersensual reason of that harmony. The harmony doesn't happen just in the empirical realm. The harmony is between the thing in itself and the subject in itself. And since I don't know anything about that supersensual reason, I can quarrel about it, but I cannot dispute about it. And that is how Kant solves this antinomy. I can add maybe, without going too deep into this for now, because I will get deeper into this when I get to Kant's moral philosophy, that this harmony in the supersensual realm is precisely based on freedom. Because in his critique of practical reason, Kant shows that we can know something about the supersensual. The critique of pure reason shows that we can know nothing of it. We have a purely negative concept of it. We can only say what it is not. But later he shows that through morality, we can know it at least in one respect, and that is we can know it as a moral realm. There is this invisible moral realm connecting all rational beings, this realm of purposes, as Kant says, and this is a realm of freedom. This is the realm in which I should regard or revere every other rational being in its freedom. So I should not just subject it to my purposes as an object which is there to serve me and my interests, but I should revere it as a purpose, as an end in itself. So I should let it be free. And well, this relationship of freedom, in a way, is where I rise to through beauty. So here again you have the connection between beauty and morality. Because as I explained in the lecture discussing that topic, when it comes to beauty, when I just contemplate an object and just take pleasure in the form in which it appears to me, in the purposive form, then I myself am free, Because here I'm not slave of my pathological interests. I'm not a slave of my drives and desires, which make me subject that object and use it for my interests. So I am free, and I rise above the sensual realm, above being this specific person with this specific desires and interests. I rise, so to say, into the supersensual realm. I rise to the status of just being a human being in general. So I set myself free, and I rise into the supersensual, but I also, so to say, set the object free and lift it up into the realm of the supersensual with me, because the object is no longer subjected to me, to my interests, but I let it be. I just watch it, I just view it, I just contemplate it, I let it be there for itself. I, in a way, treat it as if I was revering its freedom, even if it is just a thing which has no freedom and not a person with freedom. Again, if this is not fully clear yet, hopefully it will get more clear in some weeks when I talk about Kant's moral philosophy. But I just want to stress this, that this relationship between the subject in itself and the object in itself, this relationship in the supersensual realm, is one of freedom, is at least analogous to the moral relationship. And that is maybe that helps making more clear, or explaining yet again from a slightly different angle, why to Kant beauty is a sensualization of morality, why to Kant the beautiful is an allegory of the morally good. But that, again, that is how he solves this antinomy, by saying the thesis is right, we cannot dispute about beauty because we don't have a concrete, a determinate concept of it that our intellect makes of it. We cannot name the rule according to which something is beautiful. But the antithesis is also right, we can quarrel about it because we have a indeterminate concept. We have an idea of our reason, of a supersensual reason for disharmony between us and the beautiful thing. This might have been a shorter lecture than usual, but it is a quite important one. For one, once again, we see a bridge that the power of judgment and that the topic of beauty draws from the faculty of cognition to morality. Because once again, we can see beauty being connected to morality. And while, again, when it comes to cognition, when it comes to theoretical philosophy, the result of the critique of pure reason was we cannot know anything about the supersensual world. Not even that it is there. Here we now, well, we don't know more about it, but through beauty we are at least reminded of a supersensual substrate, so to say, under the world that appears to us, to our sensuality. And we will find, when I get to talk about Kant's moral philosophy, that through morality we can rise into the supersensual world proper, and we can recognize the supersensual world as a world of freedom, as a world of purposes. But also, the antinomies are important because they are what makes us critical in the first place, according to Kant. And they are what leads us to transcendental idealism. So, what that is precisely described in another lecture already. That is true for all antinomies, not just for this one. In all three critiques, once again, there is a dialectic and there is an antinomy. And no matter whether it's in the critique of pure reason, the cosmological antinomies, so the question, does the world have a beginning and an end? Is the world made up of smallest parts, or can it be forever more divided? Is there freedom? Is there necessity in the world? Or whether it's now here in the critique of the power of judgment, this antinomy between is beauty based on a concept or not? Can we dispute about it? Can we quarrel about it or not? Or, and I will get there eventually, in the critique of practical reason, the antinomy when it comes to our idea of the highest good. All these antinomies, where our own thinking contradicts itself in a way, they all serve an important function, Kant says. They awake us from dogmatism. I also already made a lecture on what is dogmatism, skepticism, and criticism. And if we didn't have these antinomies, if we didn't get into this contradiction with ourselves, we would have no reason to ever question our dogmatic worldview. But since we tangle ourselves up in these contradictions, since as soon as we start reflecting, philosophizing about these topics, we arrive at both a thesis and an antithesis that both seem to be true, that can lead us to become critical. I mean, that is what happened to Kant himself, specifically with the four antinomies that he discusses in the Critique of Pure Reason. They, as he says, are what awoke him from his dogmatic slumber. And this can lead our reason to become self-critical, to criticize itself, to ask what in its nature creates these illusions, these self-contradictions. And, as I said, it leads us to transcendental idealism. So, to making a difference between phenomena and noumena, between what appears to us and how things are in themselves. Because only then can we solve these antinomies. And that is quite important. And anyone who wants to disagree with Kant and who disagrees with transcendental idealism and is a transcendental realist should be reminded of that. Should be reminded that he now is back at zero. He now needs to give another explanation on how both the thesis and antithesis in each antinomy can be right, or how both can be wrong. Or he needs to now show how one of them is right and the other is wrong, which no one has done to this day. Kant solves the problem by showing that there is only a contradiction between thesis and antithesis as long as we don't differentiate between what appears to us and what is a thing in itself. But as soon as we arrive at this difference, it's no longer a problem. Now I can say, to get back to this specific antinomy of beauty, now I can say that there is no concept of the appearance which the judgment of beauty is based on, and therefore we cannot dispute about it because we don't know what exactly the beautiful thing is and according to what rule it seems beautiful to us. But there is a supersensual, but no further determined idea of the supersensual reason why something is in such harmony with our faculty of cognition, why something is so beautiful for us, and that is why we can quarrel about it. And so in that way, the antinomy once again proves the necessity to be a transcendental idealist, because only that lifts the illusion, only that liberates us from the natural contradiction in our own thinking. Before I get, as I already said, to Kant's moral philosophy, I still have some things to discuss. While I'm done talking about beauty specifically, I do want to talk about art, because to Kant there's the beautiful in nature and the beautiful in art. And I want to talk about what is art specifically to him, and also what is the genius, because the genius is he who produces beautiful art. And then, of course, there is still another form of aesthetical pleasure, but besides the pleasure in the beautiful, and that is the pleasure we take in the sublime. My deep thanks be to my supporters: Thomas Deuringer, Gernot Klaufen, Benjamin Lehning, Oblomov, Ökobong, Samet Özkilic, Elif Özün, Yasin Özün, Christos Pei, Alexander Reuter, Lisa Rinner, as well as to all others who support me and my aufkläring cause.